They called their older sibling, not because something went wrong, not because they needed money, advice about work, or somebody to talk them down from a bad decision. They called because of you. And before they even explained what was happening, their sibling heard it. That strange pause, that careful way they were choosing every word like saying too much would make the whole thing real. The sibling finally said, "Okay, who has you sounding like this?" And they laughed, not because it was funny, because they had been caught. That is where this first card comes in. The sun. I want to use this symbolically, not as a prediction. The sun is illumination, exposure. The moment something becomes too bright to keep pretending you cannot see it. And that is exactly what is happening inside this person. You have illuminated something they were much more comfortable leaving unnamed. Before you, they could explain their connections logically. Attraction, timing, chemistry, convenience. But you do not fit neatly inside any of those boxes. And that is what they told their sibling. They said, "I don't know what it is. I just feel more like myself around them." Their sibling went quiet. Because that sentence meant more than this person realized. This is someone who usually adjusts without admitting they are adjusting. They read the room. They know when to become louder, quieter, funnier, colder, less interested, more impressive. But around you, something drops. The performance gets tired, and underneath it is a version of them they almost forgot existed. That is why the sun matters here. You are not symbolizing excitement in this story. You are symbolizing visibility. There is something about the way you listen, the way you do not rush to fill silence, the way you seem comfortable letting people reveal themselves at their own pace. That makes hiding feel unnecessary. And apparently, their older sibling understood that immediately. Because instead of asking what you looked like, what you did, or whether you were their type, the sibling asked one very specific question. And the answer changed the tone of the entire conversation. I'm not going to give you that answer yet. Because, first, you need to understand what this person admitted about you when they thought nobody else would ever hear it. And what they admitted next was not about attraction. It was about what happens when you leave. The room feels different after you leave. That is what they admitted. Not empty, not dramatic, just different. Like something had been switched on while you were there, and once you were gone, they suddenly noticed the contrast. They told their sibling they will sometimes sit there afterward and replay something completely insignificant. A look you gave them, the way you said one particular word, something you laughed at that probably should not have been that funny, and hours later it is still there. They catch themselves thinking about it, then thinking about the fact that they are thinking about it, and that is when they reach for their phone. Not necessarily to text you. Sometimes they just check it, which somehow makes this even more obvious. Because they know what they are looking for. This is where the Guardian of Cups comes in. And again, I am using this symbolically, not as fortune-telling. Look at the image. There is this fish moving through deep water towards something delicate floating above it. It is not chasing chaos. It is drawn towards something quiet. Something that seems to soften the entire environment around it. And psychologically, that fits what this person was trying to explain. Because they did not tell their sibling, I can't stop thinking about how attractive they are. They said something closer to, everything feels kind of loud afterward. Their sibling said, after they leave, and there was another pause. Yeah, that answer mattered. Because what they were describing was contrast. Around you, they settle. Then you leave, and they notice themselves becoming restless again. Other conversations feel slightly more forced. Their usual distractions do not work quite as well. Someone can be talking directly to them, and a completely unrelated thing you said earlier will suddenly return to their mind. And they hate how noticeable it has become. Not because they hate thinking about you, because they cannot explain why someone they are supposedly being normal about has started affecting the emotional temperature of their day. Their sibling caught that immediately. In fact, after a while, the sibling stopped paying attention to how casually this person was trying to describe you. They started paying attention to everything underneath it. The pauses, the details. The way this person remembered exactly how you reacted to things while claiming none of this was that serious. And eventually, the sibling noticed one contradiction. One this person could not laugh away, could not rationalize, and definitely could not explain once it was said out loud. The contradiction was simple. They kept saying, "I'm not trying to make this into anything," and then they would keep talking about you, in detail. They remembered what kind of things make you go quiet. What makes you laugh when you are trying not to. The way your energy changes when you are tired. The difference between when you say you are fine, because you actually are, and when you say it, because you do not feel like explaining yourself. Their sibling finally said, "You realize you know a lot about someone you're supposedly casual about, right?" They tried to dismiss it. "I notice things." Apparently. Then came the Ace of Wands. And I want to keep this symbolic, not predictive. Because the Ace of Wands is often associated with ignition, that first spark of movement. The moment something stops existing only in your head and starts asking something from you. And look at the image. One point of light against all that darkness. Small, but impossible not to notice once it is there. That is what this conversation was becoming. Their sibling was putting light on something this person had been trying to keep vague. Because it was not only that they remembered you. They had started adjusting around the possibility of you. Leaving certain parts of their schedule open. Thinking twice before making plans. Seeing something funny and immediately wondering whether you would laugh at it. Having a good day and wanting to tell you why. And that was when their sibling finally asked the question. The question I told you about earlier. They said, "When something happens, are they who you want to tell first?" Silence. Not the confused kind. The caught kind. Because apparently, yes. When something ridiculous happens, they think of you. When something goes well, there is a moment where they want your reaction. When something goes badly, they imagine what you would say. Sometimes it is not even important. That is the part that got them. It could be a stupid observation, a song, something somebody said at work, a random thought that would mean absolutely nothing to anyone else. And somehow they want to hand it to you. Their sibling said, "That's not nothing." And this person knew it. Because attraction can stay contained. You can find somebody attractive and continue with your day. But wanting someone inside the ordinary parts, that is different. That means they have started occupying space in your internal life. And this person finally admitted the part they had been avoiding. They said, very quietly, "That's what scares me." Their sibling did not ask what you had done. They did not assume you were dangerous. Because they already understood. The fear was not really about you. It was about what being this attached to you was starting to require from them. Because this person knows how to stay just far enough away from needing anyone. They know how to keep things undefined. How to say enough without saying everything. How to care without making it obvious how much. And if something starts feeling too important, they can usually find a reason to question it. Bad timing. Different priorities. Maybe they are imagining it. Maybe there is something they have not noticed yet. Anything that gives them a little distance again. That is where the Eight of Swords comes in. And I want to use this symbolically. Not as a prediction. Because look at this card. There is a tree surrounded by swords. But what stands out to me is not danger. It is restriction. The instinct to protect something by building so many boundaries around it that eventually nothing can move. And that is what their sibling was hearing. This person has gotten very good at controlling how exposed they become, Except around you, they keep forgetting to do it. They say something personal and realize afterward that they never meant to tell you. They sit beside you in silence without feeling responsible for making the moment entertaining. They stop checking your face every few seconds to figure out whether they are saying the right thing. Sometimes they even forget to wonder how you are seeing them. They are just there, and apparently, their sibling understood why that was unsettling. They said, "You're not scared because something feels wrong." Another pause. "You're scared because nothing does." That landed. Because there is a difference between feeling unsafe with someone and feeling safe enough that losing them could actually hurt. And this person had been confusing the second one for the first. They started explaining themselves, saying they did not want to get ahead of anything. They did not know where this was going. They did not want to assume. And then, almost accidentally, they said something that made their siblings stop them. They mentioned a place they might go later this year. And without thinking, they said they would probably like it there. Their sibling caught it immediately. "So they're in your future now?" "No, that's not what I meant. But it kind of was. Not some enormous fantasy. Nothing dramatic. Just little things. A restaurant opening next month. A movie you would probably make fun of. A weekend they have not planned yet. And somehow, you keep appearing inside moments that have not happened. They are not consciously putting you there. That is what scares them. Their mind is making room before they have decided whether they are ready to." Their sibling went quiet again. Then they asked the question this person really did not want to answer. "If you're already this scared of losing them, why are you doing things that could make them leave?" And for a second, they did not have an answer. Because the truth was uncomfortable. Every time this starts to feel real, they do something to make it feel less real again. Maybe they take longer to answer after a conversation where they said too much. Maybe they act almost overly casual after a moment that clearly mattered. Maybe they tell themselves they are just busy, just giving you space, just not trying to look too interested. But underneath all of that, they are trying to get their balance back. That is where the Five of Swords reversed comes in. And I am using this symbolically, not as a prediction, because upright this image can suggest conflict. But reversed, what stands out here is the exhaustion of fighting something that does not actually need to become a battle. And that is exactly what their sibling was pointing out. This person keeps treating closeness like something they have to win against. They feel themselves getting attached, so they pull back. They miss you, so they wait longer to reach out. They have a moment with you that feels unusually honest, and afterward, they almost try to make it smaller. Their sibling finally said, "Do you understand how confusing that probably looks from the other side?" That stopped them, because from inside their head the distance makes sense. It feels like control, protection, a way to slow everything down. But from your side, it could look like disinterest, like they changed their mind, like you misunderstood the connection. And if you have felt that shift from them before, I want to be careful here. It does not automatically mean this is why. But inside this conversation, that possibility mattered. Because this person admitted something else. They have been watching you. Not in some dramatic way. They have been watching for signs that you might leave. A shorter reply, a different tone. You being a little less available. Anything they can use as proof that they were right not to trust this too much. Their sibling said, "So you're waiting for them to pull away?" Kind of. And while you're waiting, you're pulling away first. Silence. There it was. They had been creating the exact uncertainty they were afraid of. Their sibling did not soften it. They said, "You know they're allowed to get tired of guessing, right?" That hit differently. Because somewhere in all this fear, this person had been acting like time would simply hold your place for them. Like you would stay available while they figured themselves out. but you have choices too. And that was when their sibling asked the question that changed their expression completely. What would you actually feel if you found out they stopped waiting and moved on? At first, they gave the reasonable answer. I mean, I'd respect it. Their sibling waited. They can do whatever they want, still waiting. And technically, I wouldn't really have a right to be upset. Their sibling said, that's not what I asked, because all of that was true. But none of it answered the question. What would they actually feel? That is where the Hierophant reversed comes in. And again, I am using this symbolically, not as a prediction, because reversed, this card can speak to the moment when the rules you have been living by stop working. The script you usually follow. The things you tell yourself you are supposed to do. Stay detached. Do not assume. Do not need too much. Do not make yourself vulnerable before you know exactly where something is going. This person has followed those rules for a reason, but suddenly, their sibling was asking what those rules might cost them. And that is when the honest answer finally came out. They said, I think I'd feel sick. Quietly. Almost like they did not want to hear themselves say it. Not because they think you belong to them. Not because imagining you with someone else turns this into some competition. It was something more uncomfortable than jealousy. They imagined finding out that you had stopped reaching. That somebody else was getting those random messages. Those small updates. Those moments where you let your guard down. That somebody else got to hear the strange thoughts you only share when you feel comfortable. And the feeling that came up was immediate. Regret. Because they knew exactly what they would think. I waited too long. I made them guess too much. I acted like I had more time than I actually had. And then there was another layer. They would not only miss you. They would miss who they get to be around you. That version of themselves that does not calculate every response. That laughs without checking whether it was too loud. That says what they mean before fear edits it. Their sibling heard that, and their tone changed. Up until then, they had mostly been asking questions, letting this person arrive at their own answers. But now, they sounded serious. They said, okay, then you need to stop treating this like something you can just leave sitting there until you feel completely comfortable. This person went quiet. Their sibling continued. Because from everything you've told me, you're not confused about whether they matter. Another pause. You're confused about what you're willing to risk because they do. And this person finally asked the question the entire conversation had been moving toward. So what are you saying? Their sibling did not hesitate. I'm saying don't let that one go. That was it. No speech, no dramatic explanation. Just a sentence from somebody who has known this person long enough to recognize when something is different. And apparently, this was different. Their sibling said, I've heard you talk about people before. That got their attention. You usually tell me what you like about them. With this person, you keep telling me who you are around them. There is a difference. And their sibling heard it before this person did. They had heard them get excited about people before. Obsessed even. But excitement was not what stood out here. It was how settled they sounded. How honest. How little they seemed to be performing while talking about you. That is where the Three of Wands comes in. And again, I am using this symbolically. Not as a prediction. Because the Three of Wands is about looking beyond where you are standing now. Recognizing that eventually, something has to move forward if you want to find out what it can become. Look at the card. 3 points of light stretching into the distance. There is movement implied there. Direction. But nobody is being dragged anywhere. And that matters, because their sibling was not telling them to chase you. They were not saying, go convince them. They were not saying you were perfect, or that this was somehow guaranteed to work. They said something much more difficult. If you don't want to lose them, stop making them prove they won't leave. That went quiet, because there it was again, the pattern. testings instead of asking, pulling away instead of admitting they were scared, waiting for you to provide certainty while giving you very little certainty in return. Their sibling said, "You can't keep somebody by confusing them, and I think that is the part that matters most for you. Not that an older sibling heard about you and said, 'Don't let that one go, that sounds nice.' But the deeper part is what came after. Because this person realized holding on to a meaningful connection does not mean gripping tighter. It means showing up differently, being clearer. Saying the thing instead of hoping you somehow understand it. Not disappearing every time they feel too much. Not making you pay for fears you did not create. Their sibling had known them for years. So when they said, "You sound more like yourself talking about this person than you have in a long time," this person could not dismiss it. The call ended not long after that, and for a while, they just sat there, looking at their phone. Because there was something they had been avoiding doing. Something small. But for them, not small at all. And this time, instead of talking themselves out of it, they finally opened the conversation. And then they did something they almost never do. They stopped trying to sound unaffected. There was already a message sitting there. Half-written, careful, casual. The kind of message that could mean something if you wanted it to, but could also mean absolutely nothing if you did not respond the way they hoped. They read it again and deleted it. Not because they decided not to reach out. Because suddenly, they could hear what their sibling had been saying. They were doing it again, leaving themselves an exit. That is where the Seven of Cups comes in, and I am using this symbolically. Not as a prediction, because look at the card, cups everywhere. Some upright, some falling, something being poured from one place into another. Too many places for the water to go. And psychologically, that fits this person perfectly. They have spent so much time considering every possible outcome that they have avoided choosing how they actually want to show up. What if you misunderstand them? What if they say too much? What if you do not feel the same? What if they wait? What if they move too quickly? What if they ruin something that currently feels good? There is always another possibility. Another explanation. Another reason to stay vague. But sitting there with your conversation open, they realized something. Wanting you was not the difficult part. They already knew they wanted you around. The difficult part was being willing to let you know that. Those are not the same thing. And for somebody who uses uncertainty as protection, that difference is enormous. So they started looking back through the conversation. Not obsessively, just differently. And certain moments began standing out. Times you gave them an opening. A question that was a little more personal than usual. A moment where you stayed instead of leaving immediately. Something honest you said that could have been met with honesty in return. And suddenly they could see how often they had responded by making everything lighter, a joke. A subject change. A vague answer. A little distance afterward. Not because those moments meant nothing. Because they meant too much. And I want to say this carefully. That does not make it your job to decode them. It does not mean you should have known what they were too afraid to say. If they want clarity now, they have to participate in creating it. They understand that. But there was one memory that kept coming back, one conversation they had dismissed at the time. Because now, looking at it again, they realized you may not have been making casual conversation at all. You may have been quietly asking them where you stood, and they never actually answered you. The moment itself had seemed small. You had asked them something simple, something like, "Do you ever actually let people know when you care about them?" And they laughed. Not because it was funny, because once again, you had gotten too close to something they were not ready to name. They gave you an answer that was technically honest. Sometimes, then they changed the subject. At the time, they told themselves it was nothing. Just conversation. But now, they could hear the question underneath the question. That is where the Six of Swords comes in. And again, I am using this symbolically, not as a prediction. Because the Six of Swords can represent movement away from one way of thinking and toward another. And look at the image. The swords are still there. Nothing has magically disappeared. But there is distance opening up behind them. That matters here. Because this person is beginning to understand that moving forward does not require becoming fearless first. They can still have doubts, still feel exposed, still not know exactly what happens next. But they cannot keep using those feelings as an excuse to stay emotionally motionless. And suddenly that old conversation with you looked completely different. Maybe you were not asking for a promise. Maybe you were not demanding a label. Maybe you were simply trying to understand whether you were standing inside this connection alone. And instead of giving you something real to work with, they gave you ambiguity. A safe answer. One that protected them, but probably did very little for you. That realization bothered them. Because regret can feel meaningful while changing absolutely nothing. You can replay a moment 100 times. Understand exactly what you should have said. Recognize every place fear took over, and still repeat the same behavior the next time. This person knows that now. So sitting there with your conversation open, they made a decision. If there is another opening, they do not want to hide inside vague language. And if another opening never comes naturally, they may have to create one. Not force anything. Not demand an answer from you. Just stop pretending clarity has to begin with the other person, because you have already given them chances to meet you halfway. They are finally seeing that, and there is no guarantee how you would respond now. That uncertainty is still real, but something their sibling said before hanging up keeps returning to them. And interestingly, it was not romantic. It was not, follow your heart. It was not, everything happens for a reason. It was a warning, their sibling said. If you keep waiting until you're completely sure, eventually the decision won't be yours anymore. And that was the part that stayed with them. Because certainty sounds responsible. It sounds mature. Wait until you know. Wait until you feel safe. Wait until there is no chance of misunderstanding anything. But their sibling knew something this person was only beginning to understand. Sometimes, by the time you feel completely certain, the other person has already had to make a decision without you. That is where the Three of Pentacles comes in. And again, I am using this symbolically, not as a prediction. Look at the card. 3 separate roots, 3 separate structures. But underneath the surface, everything is connected. And that is what stands out here. Connection is not something one person builds alone. It requires participation, response, some willingness from both people to put something real into the space between them. And that was ultimately what their sibling was trying to tell them. Don't let that one go did not mean hold on to you like you belong to them. It did not mean chase you until you say yes. It did not mean some invisible force has already decided how this ends. It meant recognize what is actually here. And stop treating something valuable like it will maintain itself indefinitely. Because throughout that entire phone call, this person kept revealing the same thing. They sound different when they talk about you. They feel more like themselves around you. They notice when you are gone. You appear inside ordinary future moments without them deliberately putting you there. And the thought of losing you does not just threaten their ego. It confronts them with regret. That brings us all the way back to the sun. Visibility. You did not create some destiny they are obligated to follow. You illuminated something. Something they can no longer convincingly call casual. And maybe that is the biggest change here. Before this conversation, their question was always, how do I make sure I don't get hurt? How much should I say? How long should I wait? How much should I reveal? How do I stay in control? But afterward, the question became different. What could I lose if I never tell the truth? That does not guarantee what happens next. It does not guarantee a confession, a relationship, a reunion, any particular outcome. You still get your own choice. So do they. But this person cannot unknow what they admitted. Not anymore. Their sibling heard it. They heard it too. You matter, enough that your absence changes something. Enough that ambiguity is starting to feel more dangerous than honesty. Enough that somebody who has known them for years listened to the entire story and said, "Do not let that one go." And whatever happens from here, you are no longer something they can comfortably file away as attraction. Timing, chemistry, convenience. You became harder to dismiss than that. Because now they know exactly what they would be pretending not to see.